I don't think I have my headphones on.
We made it. Hi.
You know, made it happen to see one another.
It's so nice to finally connect.
I'm so happy. I'm so honored to have you and to have your time.
Oh,
I know you're very busy and, again, have not been feeling well. So I'm really delighted that you would take the time to be with me this evening or this
oh,
morning for you.
yeah, no, the honor is on my end as well, definitely. I've been so looking forward to talking to you for so long. So
Yes.
thank you
Yes.
for your time.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. It's my joy, my pleasure. Yay. So yeah, I'm just happy to talk about anything and everything, anything that comes up.
All of it. Yeah.
All of the things. I mean, I know I had messaged you a little bit about, um, what I'm curious because I love and I really like it. I don't know. It's been quite busy lately. I mean, everybody says that. There was this one semester in college where I had this 18th century poetry class, and I was determined that I would not use the word busy because I don't like. There's a part of me that was, I don't know, in
Mm.
my late teen, early 20 stage of just like, oh, it's almost just a signifier. Like it can be an empty signifier, but it's not. Like obviously people say they're busy because they feel busy. They probably are busy. But
Mm.
I almost wanted to fight that a little bit. And so
Mm.
I was determined to not use the word busy at all for the whole semester. But then as my final project for our final was an essay. I did it on a poem called Busy. I just thought it would be fun to
Love that.
but
You held it in, and then right at the end,
mhm.
now we can really explore busy.
Let's go
Yeah.
busy. Yeah, let's talk about busy. Yeah. Instead of just avoiding it, let's dive into what it actually might be or what it is. But I say this because I've been queuing up a lot of your videos to watch. And because I've loved listening to your conversation with Javier, also with Vervaeke and Miss Jane, was it Dr. Jane? There's another lady there too in the conversation. Um,
Terry Gentry.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a delightful conversation and I just loved it. I loved it. I'm like, I want to listen to more. But again,
Oh,
life and all of the things. So I haven't listened to much more, but I would love to continue to dive into what you are sharing about because I think there's something really, really both fascinating, exciting, um,
mm,
hopeful, but also perplexing about this connection between our emotions and our bodies, and really
yeah.
that sort of the mind and the body connection, which I've always been really, really interested in. Um,
Mm,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I think I wanted to talk with you specifically about, um, emotions and the Stoic approach to life, because a lot of times
Mhm.
that Stoic approach is a little bit more like you put your head down and you do it. And there can be a real value to being able to do that because,
Yeah.
again, like we were just talking about with having, when your kids are sick, you have a head cold or everybody in the family has a cold and you have to still care for everybody. You have to kind
Yeah.
of recognize, yeah, I recognize I'm tired and this is hard, but I still have to do
Mm,
it. And I'm going to have to do it with the most patience and love I can do it with. And so that's a kind of put your head down and do it. But you also do it because you do genuinely love the children, like we love our
yeah.
children. So it's like a,
I know.
yeah. So I guess what I mean to say is it's a kind of a put your head down and do it, but there's also the feeling of like gratitude that you can be there for them through that. Even
Mm,
when it's difficult, you can be there with them through that. And so I guess I'm just trying to think about this.
mm,
I don't know if it's a balance, but you know,
mm,
it feels as though there's the one side which you just never recognize your emotions. You never allow yourself to actually sense, feel, and the emotion. That's the one side. And then there's the other side, which might be the same as this side, but in a different different mask or something, which is to kind of always be like catering to the emotions, right? And kind of like any whim or any feeling or anything is kind of just, we'll just kind of cater to it, or we'll always see ourselves as victims because I feel, I feel, I feel. So it's like this
mm,
interesting place of like understanding how to, because again, like when either of those are going to emerge, it feels like there's just going to be this reaction to the opposite. And what exactly could be, what is the middle ground or something? What is the
mm.
like, what is really it to be dealing with emotions in a way that doesn't ignore them or like I want to say indulge or exploit that. So yeah. Anyways, that was my initial
Oh,
question.
I love yes, yeah, I love that there's so much in there. Thank you so much for also for your taking the time to watch some of those
Of course.
conversations.
Oh,
I relate.
absolutely.
Yeah, I relate wholeheartedly. You should see my my watch later playlist. It's
It's like
it
two
is a
miles
mix.
long, right?
Yeah. So I relate. I really appreciate any time that you take to
Oh,
watch.
yeah.
Uh, and that you found value in the conversation. That's really meaningful to me.
Yeah.
The way you're thinking about all of this is very aligned with how I am, I guess, trying to grapple with making sense of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you yeah. So there's a lot. I'm trying to think about the best angle in. I think first of all, you touched on something quite important, which I think our definition of emotion, or being in, even just being in touch with emotion, needs clarifying. I People are talking about all different things, is my sense. And the idea, I think, even in some of those conversations where I've spoken about giving some priority to connecting into our emotions and really taking an honest look at what we're feeling.
Yeah.
Many people, when they hear that, they interpret that as then is actually allowing that whatever that emotion wants your actions to be to just happen. So there's this, they're not discerning this difference between I'm talking about the connection into the felt bodily experience, the noticing what you might actually be feeling inside, prior to any step about your actions, whether or not, right? Whether or not you then choose to bring that into your actions or not, or how you bring it into your actions. Which is why I tend to go back to anger as a key example, because I think it just illustrates that nicely.
Yeah.
For most people, society at large, the idea of anger, when I talk about it, they usually associate that immediately with aggressive behavior or impulsive behavior. Whereas I'm just talking about the emotion inside as a beginning point. And then the how that comes into or doesn't come into your actions is sort of this whole other step. So, and I think all of that just moves too quickly somehow. There's not enough attention paid to that whole process. And so when I'm talking about taking emotions more seriously, trying to take more of an honest look at them, some of that, well, a large chunk of that is really about just slowing down, like really taking a look at what's there, as opposed to, for many people, feeling like their emotion takes over their actions, that sort of impulsive, right? It all happens so quickly, not feeling they have a choice. So then this goes back to the other component I think is really important here. For me, a lot of this just boils down to having more choice available to us, like really taking a look at the emotions inside in order to increase the choice before us, as opposed to restrict it, if that makes sense. And the slowing down can help with that for some people. Does depend on sort of the makeup of the person, but it can help because it creates that pause, I guess, as well. So it's the stopping, it's the really paying attention to what you're feeling, and then allowing the pause to decide how you may or may not bring that into your actions based on lots of other pieces of information as well. So so the reason, and then I think your question there at the end around what does the middle ground look like? So more and more so, I think it depends on every situation, and it's not a really neat response, and I think that's what's so challenging for people. They're like, just give me the
I want
formula.
the Can I
Yeah,
just jot down the formula, please?
yeah, that's it.
Keep my little cheat sheet around, and I can.
That's it. Yeah, like then teach me the steps so I know how to do that bit, and then how to do this, and then. But the truth of the matter is that every moment calls for something different, and it depends on so many variables. And I think the truth of the matter is that, you know, there's probably a moving back and forth on that spectrum, if we call it that, all the time. and it's actually our ability to be flexible in there that is, in my mind, really what resilience is about, and really what allows us most sort of, I don't want to say efficient, but maybe most meaningful movement, or you know, in some situations, based on whatever the external pressures are at the time, it may call for you to be less inclined to pay attention to your emotions in that moment for whatever reason. There may be particular demands that require that of you, or that would make most sense for you. That's okay. And then there would be other places, contexts where you may be more inclined to just let emotions wash over you and actually bubble up and just impulsively respond to them in a particular context. You know, you think about sometimes even being with close friends and sort of just allowing oneself maybe to have more of that going on. For me, I think it's really just about trying to help people get in touch with the idea that there is that spectrum, and that you can make those like it ultimately comes down to autonomy, agency. You can make those choices, but it's being informed. I think that's how I look at it. It's feeling that you are consciously deciding, as opposed to these underground processes going on deciding for you. And then what often happens is our mind comes online and creates a story about, well, I did it like that there because of these reasons, but it's usually retrofitted, you know, it's not. The story kind of comes afterwards to try and make sense of something that happened, that we might not be entirely sure why we did it that way. So,
or we don't want to admit why we did it that way.
Or we don't want to admit. Exactly. It's both. Yes. So there's these varying levels, I guess, in the way I look at it, of awareness, and you know, how conscious are some of these processes versus not. And I mean, obviously, when I talk about these things, I'm coming at it from a therapy context as well, which is not every day. You know, you're not wandering around every day trying to do an in-depth therapy with yourself and digging into your unconscious. But I understand that. So sometimes I think in these conversations, the way I speak is very much coming from that therapy context. But I wouldn't want that to get confused with, well, in every moment of every day, you should be sort of deeply interrogating your unconscious waters, and there's a place for that, and there's a place not. But it's about, I guess, in a therapy room, it would be about trying to dig up some of this stuff, and loosen up some of the structure that gets created so early on in life, or gets created and now just plays out procedurally, or without our knowledge. It's just happening. The stuff that's giving rise to the retrofitted stories that we create. If we can undo some of that stuff, it's trying to sort of create a new starting point, I guess, is another way of thinking about trying to undo some of the old crust, so that we can understand in new ways what might actually be happening for us now, with new eyes and new understanding. So that in the moment to moment, when we're out in the real world and we're not in therapy, we're not, there's less chance, I guess, that we are automatically being influenced by these very old programs and these very old structures that sit under the surface, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't mean to butt in, Aspasia.
No, go, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was all really wonderful and very helpful. And it did remind me, I think it was in your conversation with Dr. Viveki about this, the gap between feeling something and the emotion and the action. And it's so, it's so hard. It's so hard to do that slowing down process, to even be able to acknowledge that anger and allowing or recognizing that it exists, even like that we can feel it, that's not the same as doing something with it or doing the action that it wants to do, right? You know, lashing out or whatever it is. And yeah, and I think it's particularly interesting because I feel like you know, when you're saying about this idea of not every moment is going to be an in-depth therapy session, you know, like for example, if, you know, if a child we all do this. I'm not just trying to, I'm just saying children really show us a lot about ourselves. You know, they mirror a lot about ourselves and just what it means to be human. But, you know, there's a real way in which I think there is something to mimetic desire, right? Where it's like, oh, you have that, I want that. And sometimes if a child's doing that, it's not necessarily because they have some, it may be, I mean, you don't know. And hopefully it's not the case that they have some sort of deep, you know, deep emotional trauma because of wanting something that someone else has. It may be the case, and that's very unfortunate and would need to be worked through. But in a regular parenting moment with a child who's been brought up in a loving home and supportive home, you know, in a way to go into the like, oh no, like, are they having some sort of, you know, trauma response because they want the kids other cup? Because it's like, well, they might just want it because of mimetic desire, because we tend to see, oh, you have it, I want it, so I want you, you know, I want that thing that you have. And then it's sort of navigating, like teaching them that they have options, right? Where you don't actually have to want the other thing that the other person has because you happen to have one too, or they have it right now, you know, and at some point you may have something too. And I think for me, parenting is, and I know like not all of our listeners may be parents, and that's okay. I think all of us can relate though to some degree when it comes to managing, you know, interpersonal relationships, right? And dynamics of behavior and expression, and how to sort of know how to, again, I don't want to say manage, but, you know, figure out how to live with or like kind of steer things in a different direction. I mean, I think that's everyone can understand that to a degree. But I think parenting is extremely, it's like full throttle. You're experiencing this every single day, you know, every single moment. And it's a really, like, I guess what I mean to say as a parent, there's a way in which there probably will be moments when you're almost have the task of doing something a little bit more therapeutic, in the sense of like, let's do some digging, right? But then there's also moments where you're there to sort of be the, put up the guardrails on certain things, like these are our parameters and these are the consequences, not in a bad way, but to teach like, oh, okay, if you intentionally spill something all over the floor, you and I are going to clean that up, right? We clean up what we spill, right? It's not really a problem. It would be if we leave it for someone else to clean up. You know, if we're whatever 7 or something, we are aware of that. Not if you're like 3, you know, 18 months or something. But you know, things like that. Like there's something that it requires this thing that it requires skills that a lot of us, you know, you're just like a little goldfish, like tossed into the ocean. And it's I think it's very humbling and a wonderful process of learning. And there's a lot of mistakes along the way, but you know, you do learn from what works or what doesn't work. And you know, I just think that there seems to be like a fragility today. Now there can be the opposite too, which is also really difficult and not right. The hard rigidity and just, or you know, we're just gonna, you know. But there's the other side of the fragility of like, I'm gonna traumatize my child because I said no, you know. And it's just like, and I think there's a real paranoia, I think, that can be created. And I think that's so sad, because the whole point of talking about emotions is not to create that paranoia. It's to understand ourselves better so that we can, like you said, have more of those options, have more of that awareness, and understand our own agency, and teach that to our children, that you have choices too. And all choices are going to have certain ramifications. You know, and I think, and then also trying to do our own work, because, you know, not every moment is a therapy session, but there will be things, either literally having, if they have the honor of having therapy with you, which is amazing. I'm like, I'm gonna sit with Aspasia. But
I don't know that my kids would agree with that.
Like, we're gonna hire someone else to do our therapy sessions.
Don't therapize me, Mom.
Oh yeah, no, well, and that's the thing, as parents, we always feel like, I don't know. I mean, it's just that there's such a rawness of family, you know, the quotidian, the day in, the day out. You see each other's worst, you see each other's best. And, you know, things that sometimes people may have things they think are admirable about you, but when you know yourself and you say, have shortcomings in these areas, and maybe my kids or my family or my husband might be the only ones to probably see it the most, you know.
Yeah, of
And
course. Yeah.
I think there's something, so I guess it just going back to this idea of like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, of what was this thing about the therapy session? Um, um,
Mm.
um, um, oh golly, I forgot. Oh, but yeah, either you're having like an actual, you know, technically speaking, a therapy session, or you might do things that are therapeutic for you, such as, I don't know, journaling, or I don't know, just think of something
Yeah.
that you could, it may count, it may not count, depending on what it is. But
Yeah.
there are things that do require that deeper work within ourselves, which is really scary to do, but very necessary. And I think the harder the dynamic though of doing that work in the context of family is very different, because the things I'm processing through and working through don't just affect my life. And if I don't sort them out and realize what I do need to bring to the table, like say with my husband or in conversation or communicating, you know,
Yeah.
if you just, you know, what do you actually bring to the table or not, and discerning that and doing that inner work. Well, I mean, I want to
Mm.
say inner work, you know, generally
Mm.
speaking,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like so important, but difficult,
Mm.
but very necessary, because I think hopefully it could also keep us in a place of you know, relative calm, though we're humans, right? So we all get flustered sometimes, but if we can
Yeah.
do our best to sort of demonstrate a kind of even keel when we are trying to have instructing moments or like teaching moments, or things like that, like with our children. So necessary. But all of this just, there's just like absolutely no place for all of this in an accelerate, in like this frenetic world
Yeah. No.
it's just also accelerated, and it's frenetic, and like it just feels like there's not even, you know, nobody, it's not really talked about, or maybe we don't even know how to talk about it in terms of taking time to do such things. And I
Mm.
do think that paranoia is just another result of that frenetic energy of like, oh no, now I'm afraid that anything I do is going to be, you know, is going to be like traumatic, versus understanding that obviously there are things that could be traumatic and you should not do those things. But the gray space of like the nuance is that we are fallen human beings, like we're not perfect human beings. So we can also demonstrate, you know, how there's failure, but there's also learning from that failure. And there's apology, there's forgiveness, there's grace.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, I think that's kind of, that's always been helpful for me, is to understand that, um, you know, it's not, it's, I don't know, it's just the reality, accept the reality that we're not perfect. So unfortunately,
No.
our children are not going to be able to experience perfection, but they can possibly be able to see the perfecting work, right? The perfecting work, which is great, right? That's the hope to teach such a thing, I think.
Yeah. So, there's so much you said. Yeah, there's a real problem. I agree with you about this fragility that you're talking
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
and this idea of perfect parenting, and actually, in a roundabout way, I think it's very anxiety provoking, and I think it's driven by anxiety, and really, in a roundabout way, I think that's part of what then gets passed on to children in that
Yeah, yeah.
context.
Good.
It's thinking through. Well, look, if I just bring it back to me, is maybe the easiest way to talk about it. The way I think about it is, it's obviously not my phrase, but good enough parenting. I think like they're good enough. The idea that I would, even if I could press a button and somehow give my children nothing but perfection, like this perfect version of me, and you know, my husband, and everything's like exactly ideal. I mean, it's impossible, but say you could. But then you send them out into a world where that is not what happens. And in a roundabout way, I don't see that as setting them up for the reality of the world. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's going to be messy, and I'm going to get things wrong. And for me, well, maybe this is a story I tell myself, but I see it as working out the relationship, working out any relationship is ongoing work. It will
Yes.
always be ongoing work. And at the point where I realize, I shouldn't have done it like that, or, there's a way now that I see something that I did that has hurt them, or then that's an invitation to go and to work on the relationship, to repair, to have conversation, to try and reconnect, to check my understanding with their understanding.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Not just to infer, like all these movements. I think it's so much of it is about the repair and the willingness to reflect on what has happened and to have, like you say, humility, grace, to be able to go to keep revisiting it, to not just let it go and move on to the next moment. That there may be, I'm not sure that I'm putting words to it in the best way, but I see it as working out a relationship, and you're always doing that. You're trying to meet the person of your children, the person of your husband at every moment, again and again. And it's ongoing work, and we will absolutely get it wrong. And we will miss each other, and there will be ruptures, and there will be, periods of conflict. And like, I just think I think that's realistic, especially given the external pressures of life and the world we live in. And really, I try to look at it as, in my better moments, what is it that I am showing my children here about what we do with that? How, like it's sort of more of a process thing than I need to get this right in every single moment. And I think it is important that children see that their parents are human. That's not the same as saying that we don't have a role as parents to try to provide particular ways of being to our children as much as possible. But we are human, and I think that that's actually important for children to see as well and experience. Obviously dependent on where they are in terms of their age, that would change. But I think even going back to, if we think about like in a marital relationship, more so maybe than with children, I think it's rather than, so you were talking about doing the inner work and how difficult and confronting that is, but how necessary. And I agree, it's really, really hard. It's not the easy choice. But the payoff for me, the idea anyway, is that is really how I am going to have the best opportunity to really see my husband and meet my husband as the person he is, right? As opposed to all the automatic stuff that would be easier for me to just place on him and see him as. Right. And that's kind of the wall that gets in between. That suffocates possibility. And it happens all the time. Like it happens all the time. And then I sort of catch myself and like I'm almost painting a picture of who he is in a particular moment and what his intentions must be and why he's doing what he's doing and this whole thing.
Right? Or why he's not doing why he's not doing a certain thing.
And this whole sort of thing, this whole story that we all do, that we place on the other person, that's very quick and automatic. But then we take it face value. There's no interrogation of that. And then, if we do stop and interrogate it and take time and actually go and try to connect and understand the person, it's often the case, at least with me, that all falls away. And actually there's this whole brand new way that I can see him. It's a meeting of him as a person, as opposed to these automatic templates that our sort of brain is designed to just slap on people because it's efficient, right?
It's very efficient.
It's efficient. Here's, another man or whatever. It's like this, they're acting this way. It must be because in the past it's been because of these reasons. So it must be for those reasons. And it's all that's where the rigidity comes in.
Right.
And these patterns of these patterns of conflict that just get very stuck.
Yeah.
And so that's also careful and patient work and difficult work, especially if whatever sort of template you've placed over them would lead you to want to just push them away and not engage with them for a period of time.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
to
Not
really
not
sort of
yeah.
step through that and say, well, I'm going to try an approach actually,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
But
yeah, no, that's so good. And I was thinking about how much vulnerability it also takes, because
yes,
you can't control how the person responds. You can't control if they understand or don't understand. Like you can't control that. But I think it's really important to realize that, yeah, that's not in your control, but you can
yeah,
still keep showing up and doing the work to communicate, even when you'd rather just run in the opposite direction. Like even when you just want to, it's fine, you know? And that's where it's like, yeah, there are times when you just kind of have to like suck it up and it's fine, right? But there are times when, and I think this is the thing, I think there's a type of trust in ourselves that we need to cultivate, or I don't know,
yeah,
reinvigorate or something, because I do think the things that really, really, really matter, they'll keep coming around. Like there's that thing, it just keeps coming around and you're like, I need, whatever it is. Oh, I need to talk about this, or I need to rethink this, or I need to write through this, or whatever. It just keeps coming around. And I think
yeah,
that, in a way, I'm like, thank God it persists with us, because sometimes we would rather just let it go and just be like, I don't want to deal with that. Why? That's hard, or that's uncomfortable. But it's great that it comes around again, because it's another opportunity to do that work, right? Like you said, to do to take that opportunity to be vulnerable, to work through something, to, I mean, honestly, step out of our comfort zones, and that's just, that's just it seems like as humans, we are just wired, we're wired for survival, to
yeah.
stay in that comfort zone. But I wanted to also ask you about, and I wanted also, if there's anything that like has really been like burning on your mind or heart, like please share. I'd love to hear that as well. So I didn't mean to hijack the direction of the
No, go for it,
conversation.
please, Michelle. No, I love this. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good, good. Well, I was thinking about narratives, and I love that so much. And one of our dear friends, Andrew Luber, does a lot of work on theme and story, actual story writing, and things like that. And I love his work. And I think like it's such a powerful thing, to understand that we do often operate by narratives, like you're saying. We just
yeah, yeah.
suddenly, that person is doing that for these reasons and they don't understand, and da 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 da, whatever it is, whoever it is. And it's like, wow, that's like way more about what I've created, or what I've been, not, it's not like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's not that it's not true for you. It's just that it may not be the truth of the entire situation, but it feels so true for you that it's hard to, that it's a weird truth. It's like a weird truth that is also a lie, in the sense that
Yeah.
it's confining you to say, well, you don't even try. I mean, this, you already know what the truth is. This is the truth. It's this narrative about this person or this situation or whatever. And it's like, wow, no, it could actually be a complete fabrication that's informed by true situations or true moments in some, it's a
Yeah.
weird interplay of like truth and lie, I think. But
It,
yeah,
it,
ultimately narratives have power. Like these things are, and they're also actually they're able to be malleable when we understand our own agency. And
yes.
it's like,
Yes.
wow, maybe if I just in a very non-accusatory way explain what my narrative is to the other person and say, honestly, I don't know if this is the truth, but for whatever reason, I feel or might behave as if it is this way.
Yeah.
What's your story? I don't,
Yes.
sorry, like whenever I laugh, this makes a funny sound. So I'm like, I'm trying to keep myself, but I'm kind of a bombastic talker sometimes. So,
Sounds fine on this end.
oh, good,
So
good, good,
yeah,
good.
go for it. Be bombastic. I love
Good,
it.
good, good, good.
Yeah.
It was funny as I was talking about like the frenetic energy of our age. I felt like I was getting more like fast-paced
Oh,
talking and frenetic.
that's me. That's me as well. I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same way. Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
glad
yeah,
you
yeah. And I've
can
also had
relate.
coffee. So I'm
Oh, yeah.
under the hood, I'm like this, and I'm trying to just why do we do that? Why do we try to be mellow?
I don't
Maybe we're
know.
too,
I
yeah.
don't think
Maybe
I mean, it's funny because my brother used to, I have an older brother, and he used to say, I have an identical twin sister, older brother, older sister. Anyways, the point of the matter is he would always say like, you guys are being so hyper, or like stop being so excited.
yeah,
And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep being excited. I mean,
It's a
sure,
beautiful
we're
thing.
probably pretty
Yeah.
annoying as little sisters, but it came from a genuine place of just, wonder and excitement. And but older brothers have their own
I have an
perspective
older
on how
brother.
the volume of the car should be, right? Or the volume.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I just, yeah, I'm just really interested in this idea that, like, you know, narratives do this crazy thing. Because, oh, that's another thing I wanted to bring up, is like you were saying, these automatic responses and these unconscious patterns that we have. Because, I think there can be times, so I'm sure every human being can relate to this, to that feeling of like, why am I feeling this way? Or like, why do I keep getting stuck, feeling sort of hopeless? Or like, I have this goal, but I feel like I just can't do it. And I don't know why. Whatever it is, I'm just trying to give some example. It's really mostly the feeling of kind of being stuck or doing stuff. And you're like, why am I doing it this way? Or like, why am I thinking this way about it? And really, like, the sky's the limit. So why am I limiting myself so much? I mean, in a way,
Yeah.
you have real limitations. And I think there is something
Yeah.
to the fact that limits can create, like, in our limits, we can also find a type of abundance. But there are
Yes.
ways in which our minds do this thing. Like when you limit yourself to a one particular narrative, you are limiting yourself in a negative way, where you aren't thinking about possibilities, you aren't thinking about malleability, or what you can create anew, or what you can create with another human being. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
Like, it's interesting because, that ability to share one's narrative and hear from the other perspective on what their narrative is. Yeah, I suppose there's just a lot of fear about, like, oh, well, they think I'm judging them, or, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
maybe it's just a chance to say, like, hey, let's compare notes. Like, let's sort of see what's kind of compatible here and not. And I wonder if like that feeling of feeling stuck, or feeling like that strange sensation of like, I'd love to do these things, but like I keep on feeling like I can't, but I can. Why do I feel that way? Could possibly be from those unconscious patterns, or could possibly be from narratives written long ago that still honestly have the reins or the steering wheel.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, why don't we revisit those? Why don't we actually
Yes.
acknowledge what those might be? And
Yes.
I
Yes. Yes.
and the last question, I'm sorry, it's been a little bit all over the place, but I was thinking about, like, people who, they're like, okay, I'm ready. I would like to look at those narratives. I see the things that maybe had happened. And this is where I love your work so much, because I think sometimes there's that rational mind that says, okay, yeah. Like, I know that, and I want to change, and I want to create a new narrative.
Mm.
But then, like, they don't, or they can't, or they feel
Ah.
still at odds with their partner, or with their life, or their situation. And it's like, what's happening? Is it just something like they just didn't find the right key or something? Like, was there some sort of combination of something they could have done? Is it just that they weren't actually, like, embodying their what they were feeling, or those moments as a child, or those moments that were difficult? Like, what is it?
Mm.
I don't know. There's kind of a
Yeah.
question in general where I feel like, for people who have really tried so many different types of therapy or whatever, is it just a key that they just haven't quite found? Because my heart, like, breaks where for people who have, I mean this, and I hope I mean this. I hope this is coming across all right. But
Mm.
for people who've been struggling with whatever, whether it's a mental illness or some addiction or something like that, like, who have expressed wanting to not be that in that situation, what is it like? Why, and it seems like they're trying to do all the things, but at the same time, all the things in a mainstream narrative can sometimes often be not all the things, or not anywhere close to some of the potentialities that could be there. So
Mm.
what is it?
Yes.
Just something of like,
Yeah.
is there a right thing, or is it just really, does it come back to kind of like stilling ourselves enough with our own selves to figure out what that is? Because I loved it that you said that too with your clients, where it's like, you're really working to the place with the client where they are actually able to do that work, like that decision making, like that you don't just have to hold their hand for the rest of their lives. Like, you've equipped them to
Yeah.
actually tune in enough with themselves that they know what to do. So
Yes.
anyways, that was a lot,
Yes.
but
Wonderful. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's always the keeping track of all the points that I find
Mm-mm.
tricky. Yeah.
I like have a notepad, but then I forget to, like, do my
Well,
stuff.
same. I write notes, but then I look down and I don't know where to look because it's a mess. Anyway,
It's
we're
like
very
just
similar.
random words like cats,
Yeah, that's right.
narratives.
And then I can't read
Don't
half of
forget to
them.
send that email. No, just kidding.
Yeah, that's right. You should see the mess that's here. No, there's so much good stuff I want to respond to there.
Yeah. Thank you.
So in short, I think in response to that last bit, I'll just note it now, so maybe I'll remember. It's blind spots. I see it as in at least the therapy I'm doing with someone might differ for other therapists, but for me, I'm really trying to hone in on what is it that this particular person might actually need some help from another person about. Like there's all sorts of stuff that people are already capable of doing and figure right. But there's some sort of blind spot here for this person that has led them to say consciously, I want this thing, but it's not happening. You know, I've tried to understand it in all these ways and deal with these things, but something's still not working. Please help, essentially, right? So it, so I'm trying to look out for in real time with them. What's the move they're making? What's the thing they're doing that might indicate where their blind spot is? That now I can help to facilitate. Let's look at this. Let's look at this bit here that might happen so quickly for you, or happens in a way that makes such perfect sense to you. But from my perspective, maybe there's something there that we could try and dig around and see if that's what's getting in the way. So it's locating exactly where the thing is, if we call it the thing. The point is in the process for the person that this is where we should focus, in other words, as opposed to it being more of a sort of a general counseling and a just, you know, what's happening today and how is your way, like, which has its place. I'm not like, that's so very important for many people. But it is really, it's trying to be really focused and honed in on the thing that this person might not be seeing for various and this probably goes back to when you're talking about narrative. I think what you might be pointing to is the question around what is it that motivates that particular narrative? Why does that particular narrative get put together for a person? And if it's really hard to have any flexibility around that narrative, or to go, oh, it's not really working. Why is it so persistent? Why so persistent? Potentially, why is it so pervasive? So someone might have a particular way of making sense of a relationship that might be only operational really in that relationship. But for some people, you'll find, oh, that's a theme across everything, or that's a theme across any person who like you're perceiving as an authority, or who's a woman, or who is a helper, or like there might be a theme about this plays out in all of those. So you're thinking about, why is it so pervasive? Why is it so persistent? There must be, like, the idea that there would be something motivating that, right? Some kind of payoff, right? Like that's and so you're trying to think about, what is the payoff for this person? Like, what is it, even if they say it's not working for me anymore, why does it persist? And so the kind of the psychodynamic, more analytically informed, emotion focused, experiential dynamic therapy that I do,
that's amazing.
lots of words, is, I guess a really basic way of breaking it down is the idea that part of what is motivating a lot of people's decision making in areas in their life that they're having trouble with is that they are motivated to be avoiding some kind of emotional experience inside. They are motivated to try and keep it under control, or keep it under the hood, or not really notice it's there, or never bring it into a relationship of this nature, or there's lots of defensive ways that get built up in our psyche and behaviorally that allow us to keep distant from that part of ourselves, because that part of ourselves seems very scary. varying degrees of how consciously aware we are of this, but we
Right.
want to keep away from it. We don't want to go there.
Mm,
So again, if we use anger as an example, it might be that the idea, for example, of noticing that you're angry with your husband, for some people can be a really threatening, off-putting idea right, that should never be allowed, that should never happen. One would never know what to do with that.
Yeah.
That could destroy the relationship. I wouldn't be a good wife. He will hurt me if he knows that about me. Also, it could be all sorts of things, right? Or
Yeah.
for some people, it's just the idea that they understand particular emotions, again, if we use anger, as threats to their agency, that actually if I notice that, it's going to take over me, and I will do horrible things, and I will, right? Or I might, for some people, you know, I might go crazy, right? Like it's a true fear. So they're very motivated to not notice the feeling. And that gives rise to lots of defensive structures. And those defensive structures can be narratives. So they can be ways of understanding a situation that really limit the possibility of what might truly be available there. Trying to think if I can put that in clearer terms.
And I don't want to jump in.
Oh, jump in. Yeah, please,
I just
please,
had a specific question on what you just said, which I thought was great. So there's a sense of like, I don't want to face that really at all about myself, because if it did, like you said, if it did, it means I'm a bad wife. Or if I let myself feel that, I'm going to do something uncontrollable or something like that I'll regret or something. So it kind of reminds me of like, if you have a thorn in your foot, you know,
yeah.
like a complete, I don't want to touch that. You like lift your, you know, if it's in the heel of your foot, then, you know, the heel pad, you just sort of like hobble around on the ball of your foot. You know, it's like, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it, right? But if you touch it, if you allow yourself to go and dig in there a little bit, you can get the thorn out, then you're like, I feel so much better. It's crazy. Like I walk around barefoot all the time, just living on the farm, and I don't know. It's funny because I'll have some family members be like, put on some shoes, like just teasing me, you know? But sometimes
It's
I find like,
amazing. I walk around barefoot all the time as well. I don't live on a farm, but I
that's
think
okay.
it's my New Zealand roots. I'm always walking around in barefoot.
That's great. Even when I lived in a suburb, I was walking barefoot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny because so I was originally born in South Africa, and actually many of the young schools, the kids, they didn't require shoes actually. Like you took off your shoes. Anyways, it's just kind of funny, different cultures. But it's funny because I find sometimes I'll get like something in my foot, like just a tiny. It's funny how even the tiniest, basically invisible little shard of some thorn or thistle or whatever, it's like, how can it be causing so much discomfort and it's so little? Like I don't, and I think sometimes like that's could be a powerful analogy, or I don't know, could be an analogy at least for me. I'm thinking about it in terms of realizing that those little things are sometimes big things, because if you don't let yourself go there and touch that a little bit, even if it's really little and you think it's insignificant, but you're like, I can barely see it, but I can't even walk on my foot fully because I know it's in there. I know it's there. Right. It's like those emotions that are ignored, right? Or like, I'm just not going to deal with that. I'm not going to let myself think about it, feel that, any of that. So anyways, I was just thinking about that as an analogy, like, yeah, let yourself pull out the thorn.
Analogy.
Oh, thank
No,
you.
it's a great analogy. Because there's all sorts of ways that if you don't pay attention to that little signal that's going, oh, something to look at down here, something to look at, really the point of the signal. But if you don't pay attention to, all sorts of things could happen. It could become infected, it could become a much bigger. But even if it doesn't, what can happen is it may just remain a little tiny injury. But we can be so motivated to not go down there and look at it that over time, really complicated ways of no longer being aware that that's even happening start to develop. So it might be that, you know, we come to notice that, well, if I can be really busy doing this thing over here, I almost forget that my foot exists, right? So I'm over it, right? So that reinforces.
That's good.
For example, that might reinforce becoming a workaholic, or that might reinforce all sorts of things. If I pay attention to some other thing,
Oh, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, then
Yeah.
that doesn't even allow space for me to notice that that's there.
Yeah.
And it could be something like if I if I'm able to forget that I even own a foot, right? If I can cut off sensation from that whole area, if my brain can figure out some way to actually not even incorporate that into my conscious awareness anymore, that's fantastic too, right? And so then you're sort of traveling along, but there's a problem because your conscious awareness is now not aware that there's a foot. And actually that could cause all sorts of other problems, but also if you were aware that there was a foot, that opens you up again to having a greater range of possibility in your life. Really bad use of the analogy, but I think
No,
you
no. I
follow
thought
what
that
I'm
was,
saying.
no, I love that. I thought
Yeah.
that was a beautiful elaboration and really insightful and great. And it made me think too about, I don't know, one time I just had a really hard time, even figuring out where was this tiny little invisible thorn? How do I get out? So I just sort of like, like I said, I just sort of used the ball of my foot for a while. And then, but because of that, I don't remember, it wasn't something that lasted long, okay? But if we could kind of use this as maybe a thought experiment. So my calf was cramping, right? So it's like, oh my, like
Yes.
my calf's cramping because I'm like using the ball of my foot all the time.
Yes.
Long story short, I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to cause other problems. So I'm gonna go and really take some time to find this thorn or soak my foot in baking soda and water, whatever it was. I did eventually get it out, thankfully, and I was able to walk heel to toe again, and all was well with my calf. Again, very thankfully. But sometimes there are these like, it started with the thorn. Now the calf's feeling this way, right? And now okay. So say again, very, very unfortunate situation that I wish upon no one. But if their calf was like kind of cramping up or causing some other type of like muscle ligament issue, right? Now they're like, I want to ignore that because they're already ignoring the thorn. And now it's like this, I feel like it can become very quickly a jumbled mess of like, is it the calf or is it something else actually? And you have to do all this, like you said, this uncovering maybe that wasn't the term used. I think it was maybe at some point. All this sort of unpeeling to figure out what this initial thing was, so that you can get back to not having a sore heel, so that you can start walking properly, so then your calf doesn't hurt. And you know what I'm saying? So I think it's so fascinating
Brilliant analogy. Brilliant
oh,
analogy, and I'll tell you
oh.
why. Because the cramping calf, so we can understand the cramping calf muscle. So in your example, you were able to say, oh, okay, that's happening because of the foot, right?
Yeah.
So if we pretend instead that that's the anxiety that sits on top of these feelings. So often what happens is, right, there's I guess there's the emotional injury, if we call it that, or there's the thing that, yeah. And then one way that we start to protect ourselves from noticing that it's there is also if we get very good at being busy over here and forgetting that our foot exists or whatever. The moment that we start engaging in an activity where the signals from our foot are starting to break through into consciousness, we can no longer ignore our usual ways of being able to ignore that our foot exists, right, are being threatened in this new scenario. Maybe someone's asking us very clearly about our foot, right? And that reminds
Hey,
us
I
we
noticed
have
you have this. No, I just have this scene in my head of like somebody like pretending that they don't have this huge thorn in their foot and like it's all wrapped and they're like limping and like they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I'm sorry.
showing a photo of a foot and saying, I've got two. Do you have two?
Yeah.
But something's happening in the usual context that allows them to forget their foot. That is starting to, the usual ways of forgetting they have a foot are starting to break down. It's harder to ignore. We call that sort of signals breaking through into consciousness. There's a way that anxiety comes online now that is the signal going, danger, danger. Anxiety is very uncomfortable and it's motivating us to get out of whatever is happening right now so we can go back to forgetting we have a foot. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
so the anxiety signal is kind of like a final attempt or like another gate. I don't know if gatekeeper's right, but another signal that's saying, oh, warning, warning, this whatever is happening right now in this scenario is threatening the status quo because now, right, now you might remember you have this injury or this emotion or this foot or however we're talking about. the anxiety is often a signal to that motivates us to get out of whatever is happening right now. You know, that the feeling of, oh, I just want to get up and leave this room
Oh yeah,
now.
like your heart's racing. You're like, oh, I
Yeah.
just need to go, this needs to
Like
stop or something. I'm gonna
talking in front
disappear
of
now in a
people. Yeah,
hole.
yeah, yeah. That's it, totally. Just sort of like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want
Yeah,
to run away, get out of here.
yeah,
It
yeah.
motivates you to get out of the situation because it's often trying to motivate you to get out of a situation that is calling your attention to something that you normally ignore, right? Or
Yeah.
that is normally being cut out. And so the cramping, if we think about the cramping leg like that, what often happens is people present to therapy because they say, I have a real problem with a cramping leg. You know, like, oh, it's just, it gives me such, it gives me such agony and it's really uncomfortable and I want to get rid of the cramping. And, you know, and like, that's where the focus is. It's anxiety. You know,
Yeah,
I feel
anxiety,
anxious
right?
all
Yeah.
the time, don't know why.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm, mm,
and their
mm.
focus is squarely on like, what is the thing that we do that helps me to get rid of that? And the confusion can be that there's lots of ways they know how to get rid of that, which is don't put myself in a situation where someone's talking about feet. like don't put myself in a situation.
Where you're playing where you have to play Twister. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like, put your feet front
don't put me in a situation where there's an anatomical chart. It's very confusing to me. But if you think about, again, if we use anger, it's just a good example because most people can relate, I think, to some degree. Uh, don't put me in a situation where someone is like questioning me or where there's potential conflict or whatever, because I notice anxiety. I get so anxious and uncomfortable, right? But the anxiety might be because anger is being mobilized underground. The
Yeah.
thorny thing in your foot is starting to tingle.
Yeah.
And now the intensity is so great that our usual ways of avoiding noticing that are falling apart. And we're highly, highly motivated to never have that feeling in a marriage, in a friendship, wherever it is.
Yeah, well, that's so good.
And so people are often really fixated on doing the thing that helps them get rid of the crampy leg, as opposed to the idea that the crampy leg might be like a symptom of something else that's going on. Like that might not be the starting point. And so can we look under the anxiety? I mean, this is just one kind of presentation, but can we look under the anxiety and try and understand? Again, this is that slowing down, and I think like a lack of emotional literacy, or maybe it's a lack of anxiety literacy in society at large, but the idea that anxiety can actually just come about in response to a feeling being activated inside us. So the threat, the alarm that goes off, which is the anxiety, can be about the mobilization of a feeling inside us. It's not this. So I don't think that that's really clear out in the general public.
Okay. No.
As an idea.
Yeah.
And so even just slowing down and trying to help people see that might be happening for them is useful.
Oh, yeah.
But just because I want to try and use that analogy as completely as I can, because I think it's a really
Please.
So people might either come and say because they are really focused on the cramping leg and they want to get rid of the cramping leg, or they might come in because it's sort of the next level. So they're noticing that they're noticing that for some reason they just don't engage with their partner very much. They just don't have in-depth conversations with them. They're quite avoidant, even though a part of them really wants that. Like on paper, that's what they want in their relationship. They don't understand, why is this happening, right? And so what might be happening there is that they're actually really focused on their defenses. So their defenses are the thing that keeps them from ever feeling the cramping leg. So it's the next step up.
Right. Well, I was saying, it's like there's this chain, right? Like there's chain reactions. It's like it's the thorn, the foot, then the the cramping like leg, and then something else can come from that. Like, and physiologically, I'm sure that could result in like even back pain. And like because one of your sides is like this side's going to overcompensate. Now suddenly your left arm could be starting to hurt. You're like, so you're like now you're thinking about your left arm. You're like this, and you're like, and it's weird because it almost seems. And I don't interrupt because I'd love to hear you. Like if there's. It's like I do think it's weird. It's interesting because I guess it almost because you could perpetually ignore your body, right? Perpetually. I mean, you could be like, well, okay, like I'm going to ignore the heel. I'm not going to take time to look into that. So then the calf happens. And you know, also if you're moving this quick, you're just like, oh, well, now my calf's hurting. And then so you're like, well, I'm going to figure out a way to ignore that. Now my arm's hurting. Like you could just, so I feel like it's weird. I don't know if it just takes a moment where somebody's like, I really don't want this to keep doing this or something, like, because apparently they were fine with their heel doing fine in the sense that they're like, I'm just going to let that do this. I don't know, maybe it's like it gets to a point where something, it's like, I don't know, either there's a crisis or there's something happens, or like it's affecting things so viscerally that you're like, okay, I guess I should probably look into my arm. And then you're like, oh, the arm. And then you're like, oh, the leg and the heel. And so I mean, sure, there's a lot of unpeeling to be done with that, but I do believe like our bodies tell us things. And sometimes I think there can be a frustration of like, well, I've been trying to do the stuff, you know, but maybe it's less about, I mean, yes, there's a place for doing, don't get me wrong, right? Like the doing is a lot of everything, but maybe it's about the feeling, maybe it's about the sitting with, maybe it's about, you know, just even slowing down first and foremost. Can you like allow yourself to slow down or give yourself that space to slow down? You know? So yeah, but if there's more to flesh out for your analogy, with that analogy, I'd love to hear it. And then I'll have another question for you next. Yeah,
of course. So another way that the stacking can work. Like you might have the thorn in the foot and then the cramping calf muscle. And then people could also, a defense against noticing the cramping calf muscle could just be to stop moving.
Oh my gosh.
But this is, you know, paralysis, procrastination, passivity, lots of these, withdrawal, you know, like depression to some extent. It's the sitting still. Now, I've learned that as long as I don't approach, as long as I don't ever go into like meaningful conversation with my partner, or as long as I never request anything of my boss, or as long as I never say no to a friend, or like as long as I never do these moves, I will never notice the cramping thing. And so there's a again, this becomes really restricted in what is possible to us. That just really seems like something. And so that's deeply reinforcing, right? It's deeply reinforcing underneath because it keeps the anxiety at bay. Then we don't have to have that horrible cramping muscle in our calf. Things feel calm.
Right? Everything's okay, right? I mean, I'm not moving at all, but things are great.
But then often this is where that narrative that comes in, though, Michelle, is because often then there's a way that we can our minds are so fantastic, and we can create such beautiful stories around why that's working out well for us and why that is really the only option available to us. And like you said, like everything's fine.
And like everything's fine. Why, like you're kind of it's almost like if everything's fine, you're making a mountain out of a molehill to look any further than it's fine.
And so that part of you inside that's always, because there is always this other part, right? This is the idea that is aware that actually I want more for myself. I want more, like there's this, I want more. I want to break through this. Right, that part is crying out and trying to get our attention quite often. And so we trying to blanket it down with a story that, you know, this is how an employee should be with their boss. And, you know, it makes me a good person. Like lots of these things we do, right? This is how I show my love and my family, is to never have an opinion and to just, you know, this is really good. And, you know, and actually it suits me fine. And it like, there's all these ways that some of the stories we tell ourselves are trying to push down the noticing of this kind of stacking analogy we've spoken about. And it's usually the crisis point of those two things inside us that leads a person to come to therapy. So it's no longer the thing that has been able to sort of keep all that at bay for so long is starting to break down, and that could be for all sorts of reasons. There are just some universals where I see it usually creates some kind of conflict like this that brings people to therapy. So things like you know, often the death of a parent, or a parent getting unwell, or having your own child, or trying to have your own child, or like lots of these sort of generational changes, or obviously the breakdown of a relationship. For some people, like some new new stressful demand that's being placed on them. Some people, it's actually leaving stressful demands for whatever reason, like maybe they no longer need to work and they had a really intense career, and now all of a sudden they're left with kind of space and time and they're realizing all these things, right? So that it's like a change in the equilibrium, I guess. And that would be, but there was something else that you were talking about that I wanted to get to. Where were you taking, where did you take that point to at the end? You were saying something about,
was it having to do with the layering, whereas like, does something just happen where it's like I guess I have to figure out, because the person could have, they could always ignore, like they are obviously ignored the thorn pain, so they ignored that. So like,
oh, I know
okay,
what it was.
good.
Yeah, it came to me. Thank you so
very
much.
Good. Oh yeah.
That's why I love talking to women. I feel like there's just like this difference in kind of like
synergy.
Help me find the thread again.
It's like intuitive like assistance with each other. I love it. Yeah.
Totally. So I do think a really important part in all of this when I talk about therapy as well, that doesn't get as much airtime just because it's harder to explain. It really is harder to explain in forums like this, in a general sense. But we should acknowledge that a lot of what leads to all of this being unconscious and all of these motivations being difficult for people to just sort of consciously reflect on by themselves and go, oh, that's what's happening. Oh, underneath the cramping, there's a thing in my foot. Oh, okay. Like the reason we can't just do that is because if you think about developmentally, if that little thorn has been placed in your foot when you were 2 years old, right, as an example, and as a 2-year-old, you become aware of it, and you happen to be in a context where that's completely unacceptable to have pain in your foot, like either no one cares or people get angry at you for saying that, you know, something's in my foot, or you get some painful consequence for being aware of it, right? There's all sorts of ways that could be. If you learn really early on that this cannot be so, this is completely at odds with the external reality that is going on around me, and you're 2, right, versus your caregivers who are, if you don't do what's needed by them, you'll die, if we look at it that way. So the demands to fit into what they need you to be are very, very great. And so if we use the analogy in that way, this disconnecting from noticing that you have a foot, from noticing pain, from noticing the cramping in your leg, all the defensive structures that get built up to keep you from even seeing any of that, right? They can start really, really young, and that is motivated by a desire to stay alive, but also like the attachment motivation, like needing some form of attachment relationship, needing, you know, to have some form of connection with the person who's tasked keeping you alive. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, because it is in those moments, it is a necessity. Like it is actually a wonderful thing that the human being is able, I guess the psyche, the brain, however you want to look at it, our bodies, that we are able to do what is necessary to get through that phase of life when the conditions around us, you know, are at odds with obviously what we need for our flourishing. Right. They are what they are, and just trying to find a way through it. And so it's not about, I think that's important to acknowledge, because when people come into therapy, it's often the case that what we're doing in my kind of therapy is trying to understand what those structures were that got built up for you, right? And then very carefully trying to see if we can dismantle some of that, because those structures were about a different time and place. They were about child in an environment they really had no control over. With potentially people around them who were scary or rejecting, or, you know, and they had to be a particular way. But those old templates and structures that led to the building of all this defensive stuff and all these narratives that come so automatically to us, and all the ways we ignore certain parts of who we are inside, that they are no longer relevant to the here and now. And that is what I mean by that. when I'm in, when my husband does something and I find myself, instinctively just wanting to, avoid him, right? It's the stopping and realizing what exactly is going on inside me. Like what is the narrative? And
yeah.
And the stepping back into contact with him as him, the person of him. Not as another example of a caregiver who had no room for me to have painful feelings with them, or trying to come back to hold on. This is the person of my husband. And not falling into the automatic. Anyway, I think that's important to foreground, is that in therapy we are trying to that's why it's such careful work. We are trying to understand what are the defenses that are just automatically at play for this person that they don't see. That goes back to the blind spot thing, helping them to make connections about how that might play out for them currently and be part of what they're struggling to achieve in their life, or whatever their presenting issue is. And then would it make sense for us to try and do some deep work to break those down, so that you can see with fresh eyes what is going on around you, and start again to decide what you can and cannot tolerate. You may be perfectly able to tolerate these painful feelings inside and not have that lead to you needing to disconnect from people. Maybe you can be with your partner in your pain. Maybe the two of you can be with it together. Maybe that can be connecting and beautiful. Right? So as opposed to being disconnecting. And anyway, I think you get the idea.
Oh my golly. I'm so glad you dove even deeper on that and really fleshed that out. That was beautiful and really helpful. And I think that and I don't know if this is maybe the way you had said it, but again, from your talk with sorry, it was Dr. Temple. I know it's Dr. Vervaeke, but who was the lady who
Dentry, Terry Dentry.
Terry Dentry. Yeah, Gentry. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you froze for a second. Okay, excellent. So so Dr. Terry Gentry and Dr. Vervaeke, thinking about, like, because it was such a powerful talk, and you used the example about the gentleman with like the wrist pain, and I think something that it made me think about, or something you had said, was just this kind of acknowledging. It's actually almost like recognizing that worked for you then. Like you said, it's actually kind of miraculous that our bodies and our psyches and all of us can do that protection, in a sense of like a guarding, in a way, to be able to get through that stage of life, or that situation, or whatever it is. But it's hard because psychologically and all of the wiring says that's good, that helps me, that protects me, right?
Yes.
It's so hard to say, hey, it did. That's what it did protect you, but it's not working now, or it's not protecting you now. Now it's suffocating you.
Look at the suffering. Look at the suffering it is leading to now. Yes. Getting really clear on that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's strange because it's almost like it seems like, especially when we go back to the physical example of the arm, the cramping leg, and the heel that hurts because of the thorn. There's a way in which, and this is why I started the conversation with like the Stoic, which honestly, I think there's a lot of good things to learn from Stoicism. And honestly, what I'm talking about may not actually be classically Stoicism, but
Stoicism proper.
What's that?
Stoicism proper, like
yeah, exactly. It's my kind of like, I don't know, it's my notions I give to it, which are maybe my narratives that I give to it. But this sense of like, ignore that pain and keep fighting, right? It's like there's like this weird thing where maybe you're not actually, like, how do I put this? Maybe in you being tough and like not thinking about your foot, right? Or that you even have a foot, right? Just completely ignoring it. Maybe you're not letting yourself suffer enough. Maybe you're not actually, which is so counterintuitive, and it sounds mean. It's like, but there's something but I think
it's the opposite of fragilizing someone, though. It's actually trying to, I think what you're saying is, imagine if we could show people that actually you are capable of holding that pain, of experiencing that pain and doing what you might need. Like, why one or the other? Like it does, it sort of wraps people in cotton wool.
Yeah. But I think that when there's been a chain of things ignored, I do wonder if the pain can get so bad, right? Where it's like, I have got to figure out a way to not think about that, or I can't think about that, you know, and you feel, a person can feel, it's very difficult if somebody's dealing with some sort of chronic pain. I mean, I empathize. My heart, again, my heart breaks for that situation, because it's like, it's hard to even fathom just how difficult it is, really. But the thing is that when a person feels that way, there can also be a desperation, right? Of like, I feel like I've tried everything. I feel like I've, done the things. I feel like I went to the doctor, whatever it is, right? And so there's that level, right? Of like that potential desperation, but still wanting to hold hope that things could be better. And then the sense of like, am I wanting it hard enough? Like, does it come down to just, I want to, is it like a pure thing of like, is it just about like, if I want it hard enough, can I figure out the key, or whatever, to unlock this? But I think that there's something about the pain getting so severe that, it almost feels like I can't pay attention to it, and that's how I'm strong, right? That's how I'm strong. And I'm not trying to discredit that, because again, there's something really, I do think there's something, in a way, there's something admirable about that, for sure. And maybe that is all the person has at their disposal in that particular moment in life, and you wish them the best with that. And there's something to be learned from every particular person and their situation and even their choices. Anyway, so what I mean to say is, like, I don't mean it from like a judgment place. It's just more so, I wonder if there's that's what I kind of mean with leaning into the pain, where it's not that you're not trying to do this just so you can like suffer, like in this sort of self-torment. It's really to say, oh wow, like that pain I was initially avoiding, if I actually like let myself sit with that pain, maybe something's going to be birthed. And I think about my birth experiences, it's like transition is brutal, right? Like it's just brutal. But so I'm like, did I put something on my face? There's like something shedding all over me from the chair. And I'm just like, oh, it's like little, anyways, pieces of the chair. But
one of those chairs too.
I'm like, why are you shedding on me?
Yeah.
But it's I think about birth, I think about transition, and I think about, again, just how brutal and intense that can be, and how you just want to climb away. Like, I just remember being like, I want to get away from that feeling. And yet, like, when it's like it's this radical, crazy, like allowing yourself to feel it, to not run away from it, to let yourself feel it, to relax into the pain as much as you can, which then opens everything up, right? We're now like baby's coming now. Birth is happening now. New life is happening now.
Trusting your ability to bear it.
Yeah. And so it's almost like, I wonder if this might be something at play here, where, again, I'm not trying to say like, because again, it seems like a judgmental and maybe even very misinformed statement to say. So I'm just to be clear, I'm not saying this is the case or the situation, or that it is for every person. But there is something where obviously avoiding that initial suffering caused a lot more suffering. And then to go back into to not ignore it, because, you get to a place where like ignoring works, right? I don't have to feel it anymore. So then you have to go back into the pain, and it feels just so unbearable, right? But it's like that birth moment, like it feels so unbearable. But if you can let yourself feel that pain intensely, fully, completely, perhaps this could be a birth, perhaps this could be the unleashing of that new life, and of the freedom, truly the freedom, right, that can come in healing, whether it's emotionally, physically, etc. So I hope that made sense.
It does. Makes perfect sense. I think too, about like adding on to your statement when you say that, also that here with another person, like can we look at it anew and take steps into it here together there's something about in the therapy room, the doing it, and I've said this before, like they're doing it with another person, that's part of the therapeutic element. what I find is I think there's lots of ways that can be the case, but it's to do it with another person. You're not alone in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that another
100%.
person is there with you.
Yeah.
And I think I do also context again. There is an important well, it's vital that someone is choosing to do this because they are sick of the status quo, because they have made a decision inside themselves.
Yeah.
And this part can be the really, this can be the really long front end, right? But getting very clear that the way things currently are, if it continues like this, that I don't want that for myself. Getting very clear on the cost of what is currently happening.
Yeah.
And this would be an attempt to try and do something differently. We don't know if it's going to work. We don't like, and it's let's just try it together. Let's start to look at it together.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And starting to see just how much capacity might actually be there that you've been telling yourself all this time you can't do, you can't bear, you can't look at it, you can't, there's no way, I have to avoid it. Taking small steps into that, really testing that out together with another person. That is a large part of it. It's there's no point pushing someone into it, right? There's no point forcing someone into. This is more about for people when they get to a point that they decide that that is what they want for themselves. How can we do it together? Or if they're in conflict, which is pretty much 90% of the time, a part of them does really want it, but there's still always that part that says, oh, I don't know about that, I can't do that. And so a lot of the work is just trying to make space for both parts of the person, really exploring them. And at some point, this get the upper hand and you're ready to go and you start to look at the things in a new way. But not always. I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is that it's not going, and I don't think it should be, it's not going to be the case that for every single person they get total clarity on how this is playing out. They decide, that's it, I've had enough, I'm going to do things differently. And it all happens. And then there's this huge kind of breakthrough and all this understanding of what happened when they were younger that's led to now, and now they see things differently and they're completely liberated, and now they just have full and easy access, never put templates on other people, or there are stages here, obviously, and it's a spectrum, and it's what is good enough for you. I just want to help a person to get to a point that feels like good enough change for them, step that's enough for them, and they feel like has increased their sense of agency, autonomy, movement in the world, possibility, liberation from old kind of automatic suffering patterns, even if that's just a little bit of movement. And that's if they don't want to look anymore at that, they don't want to go into, that's fine. It's about trying to, people are going to have different external pressures on them at different points in their life, and obviously each individual person, right? So I think it's important to take that into consideration. I don't want this to sound like I'm suggesting that every person should be doing some, huge in-depth ideal set of therapy, and that's just not going to work for a lot of people based on a lot of other external reasons outside of their control. And if we go back again to thinking about the child, who only has so much control, not very much at all, right? And most of it is about what the people around them are doing. That is actually the settings that they have to work inside. They don't have a lot of agency to change any of that. But then as we get older, for most people, that changes, that balance starts to change, and we do have more ability to change our context. But for many people, even in adulthood, they really still don't. So it's trying to, again, be realistic about that. For many people, they may find themselves in particular contexts where they don't have that level of control. And so I don't mean to imply that, that everybody, I think this is clear. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, and I totally agree. And I think that's really important what you just said. And yeah, again, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, because it's not like, it's not like you got some 3-step program and again, it's not like there's a formula. It's not like we're saying this can you know, oh, this like it's like this sweet spot, I think, in believing that there's possibility for every human being, right? But also not expecting that everybody may necessarily get there. What does that even mean, right? Do they want it, right? So, but you see what I'm saying? So I think it's that place of realizing, yeah, it's not like if somebody, I don't know, if somebody's not, and again, like it's funny even saying that because I think we feel this particularly again in family context, right? Whether it's a loved one, you know, a mother, a brother, or someone where you feel the sense of desire for wellness, whatever it is, right? Like whether it's physically, emotionally, all of it, spiritually. And I think that's the hard place where, I mean, we can all have like hard places in life for different reasons, but what I mean to say is it's hard to see the ones you love struggling, right? Or suffering through something, right? And but also we can't pretend to like necessarily know the answers to that, but at the same time, maybe we can still hold hope for that possibility. And then like I think I had sent you an audio message a while ago now, but I think it was in a way how the conversation concluded with Dr. Terry Gentry and Dr. Vervaeke about embodying to a degree what you're trying to cultivate in that space in therapy, right? Where you, first of all, the person may not want what you desire for them, even if what you desire for them is good, right? Or like you think would be good, right? Do they want that? Is that what they would define as well-being or whatever, you know? Now there's some general things that most people would agree upon, but there's a lot of gray areas in between. But I do think that the sense of like, I think there's something quite hopeful in realizing the obvious, but nevertheless, I'm going to say it, where you can't control what that person does and what they end up choosing for themselves or choosing to do or not do or face or not face. And it's hard, right? Because if you see somebody, again, if you see somebody struggling, suffering, you're like, all I want to do is help them. I wish I could do something for you, you know? I love you so much. I want you to be, I want you to feel better. I want you to be well. And so, yeah, there's that helpless desperation. And I think it comes from a good place, you know, but it's like, well, okay, there's only so much you can control in terms of what that person's going to be able to do in their own life, or choose to do or not do. But you can put your effort into what you can control, what you can work on, and perhaps in bringing that atmosphere around that person, maybe it starts to tinkle things for them. Maybe it starts to activate things for them, possibly. No, I don't think anyone should necessarily go around thinking that they are the activation button. But you know what I'm saying? Like when you're doing that work on it, again, I don't know why I'm looking for another term when inner work will probably do, but you know, when you're doing that, the hope is that, you start to accept things a little bit more and realize what isn't in your control, which is just like, we all know that intellectually, right? But like our hearts, our minds, well, I already said intellect, our hearts are like our psyches. We don't always act as if that's the case, or we don't always, the things that keep us up at night don't always, it's like the things that keep us up at night don't, they can't compute with the idea or the reality that like, yeah, that's not in your control,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often think, and look, this translates into relationships of all kinds, but I have to, in therapy, I'm often thinking the relationship between autonomy and connection, right? So autonomy and connection. And I'm trying to be, as part of what you're doing anyway, I'm trying to be assessing what is going on for this particular person in terms of those two constructs, also here with me. But ultimately, I see my role as trying to facilitate autonomy in this person. They have the right to choose to keep doing what they're doing. That's not mine to, to enforce on anyone. It's more for me, I guess the hope is that can I at least provide an experience here for this person where they might they might start to see things, they might start to see connections that they weren't seeing. They might have some kind of new insights, even if that's the case. And they still walk away saying, actually, I see that now. I understand what you're saying. Oh, it was actually, yes, I agree. And I'm still going to keep doing it because you know what to do. I get it. Theoretically, to do the other thing would be better for me, but I'm just gonna, this is where I'm at, and this is what I'm choosing to do. Then you know, I'm not going to sit there and have a big argument with them. Like that's in a way, there's a love that goes, and maybe this is more too about relationships at large. There is a loving act in terms of supporting a person's autonomy, even when it's so different to what you would choose for them.
Or choose for yourself, right? Like
Or
you're
choose
like,
for yourself. And if there's someone that's actually part of your life and that's creating a frustration for you, because you know, then it's also, but it's holding all of that at once. I can be so frustrated. I can feel so angry towards you, right, for this decision you're making, but also choose to support you in it because I love you. And I want to support your autonomy. And this is noticing complex feelings. So noticing there's not just one. I don't have to have one feeling towards my partner. It can be both at once, like this kind of idea. Being able to hold multiple feelings is another level of the sort of complexity that we're trying to help people work towards. Because many people, they feel they have to choose one or the other. And that's part of what then creates problems about noticing one, because and so there's the autonomy piece, but then there's the connection. And so what I mean by that is for many people, again, it's hard when I'm being general and vague because it's so different for different people, but in a general sense, for being able to still feel connected with another person while standing up for our autonomy is its own kind of complexity as well. And so even therapy, again, if just through the therapeutic relationship, me and the client, even if they just get an experience for the first time there with me, that they can make these sort of really that they can stand up for their autonomy, and that doesn't have to break the connection there in the room with me. We can still be connected through that. That can be its own kind of learning as well. That it doesn't, for example, what I mean by that in basic terms is that it doesn't lead to me saying, oh, well, then, you know, I don't like you, or I like it doesn't lead to disconnect. It doesn't, well, you're impacting on me now, or
that I could be the silent treatment or something.
But I can just be there with you in it. Notice how different our two opinions might be. Notice how different our two perspectives might be. And yet can we still be connected in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is that kind of, so I think that's I think that's relevant. Why did I get to that? What do my notes say? Nothing. Autonomy and connection.
I'm trying to trace back a little bit.
Because you were talking about sort of people with pain.
Well, I think that what I was talking about, you know, because I'm talking from a place of, you know, layman, or I don't know what else to say, laywoman. You know, obviously from a therapist or a therapeutic approach, it's going to maybe be, you know, the role is somebody is saying, help me. And you're there with your expertise, with your skill, with your experience to say, okay, like you want to do this, let's begin, right? For me as like a lay person, in the sense that I'm not, you know, I'm not a therapist, it's that place of acknowledging, well, that's just it. Like, I'm not a therapist. However, perhaps there's still a type of assistance in doing something. Like it's kind of like when somebody does something brave, you know, they did something brave. They didn't tell you to do anything or whatever. They didn't give you advice. They just did something brave. And then you think, maybe I could do that too, right? So I think there's that hope, or I don't know, realization.
Like a modeling. Like
And it's like, I'm not sure if it's a modeling that the person may choose, right? Like they might not choose to ultimately do that. That's okay. And maybe, you know, and it's so relative, like, right? Like if I say, oh, they're doing a brave thing, I do a brave thing, maybe there's already a thing you're doing that's brave that you're not even acknowledging about yourself. But I mean, I think that Yeah, it was, I think that's so beautiful what you said though, because this idea of being able to say, yeah, I might choose differently because I wouldn't want to live with the crappy
Yeah.
calf, right? But you may not at this point, that you may
Yeah.
not be there yet, or you may not ever be there potentially. And I'm still going to love you and not treat you differently. And I can
Yeah.
still hold the space of feeling sad and honestly a little
Yes.
frustrated that you won't check into your crappy calf, but I'm still
Yes.
going to love you and support you and be here with you through that and
Yes.
do whatever I can
Yes.
to, yeah, to be present with you.
Yeah.
You
And we
know,
can
and
notice all of that together.
exactly. Yeah, noticing all that together is huge too. And it made me just of like, I don't know if this concrete example will exactly
Yeah.
relate, but it made me think about, with children, right? Like
Yes.
when they get a little older, when they're more vocal, um, getting to the older, a little bit older years, not teenage yet, but right before that preteen sort of age. And it's funny because sometimes I say like, yeah, we don't actually have to agree about that. Like you can be upset with the fact
Yeah.
that, I said no
Yeah.
to the whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to be happy about that, you
That's
know?
right.
And you
That's right.
can, you might not like that. That's okay. I don't really always like having to say no, but it is necessary sometimes, right? So it's a mixture of feelings. And I think the hard thing is understanding how to, and maybe it's just best with modeling, though I think sometimes there might be some verbal mediation of understanding like attitude and disposition, right? Because like, okay, just because you don't like this though, doesn't mean you can kind of humph at me all day or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could
Yeah.
choose to humph at me all day, but what
Yeah.
would that be doing for you? Like, how is that really serving you? And how is that really using your energy? Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how is that making it someone else's problem when it's something you're dealing with? Because and this is good. I mean, not that I'm saying there's no place for humping and grumping. We're humans. We all do this sometimes, right? But making a different choice of saying, I'm not just going to give you the cold shoulder. I'm not just going to hump and grump at my husband all day because, he didn't read my mind, stuff like that.
How dare he not?
What
Come
is
on.
wrong with you?
That's all we ask.
I mean, it's so simple. It's so simple. um,
Can relate. Yeah.
yeah, but when you're talking about the anger, where you said someone, okay, so you were saying about defense structures where you said somebody's angry, but they won't let themselves acknowledge that because they feel like they'd be a bad wife if they feel angry towards their husband, right? Or they
Sure.
feel scared if they let themselves be angry. What if they start throwing punches? I don't know, I'm just making this
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's often what goes on in someone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah,
In
they're
someone's
like
life.
they're
Yeah.
fearful about that, and understandably
Yeah.
so. Like we don't want to be throwing punches,
Sure.
unless you take it out to the boxing,
Unless it's
the
needed,
boxing
right?
bag.
Unless it's needed, unless your life is on the line.
That's
Like there
true.
is,
That's true if you're
it's
defending your
important to
life.
notice that there's a reason that it's there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah,
Actually,
yeah, yeah.
we need access to that at some point, we would hope, right? If you need to
If we
fight for
needed
your
to
life for a
fight for
moment,
your
you
life.
would hope that the defensive structures don't come online that tell you, oh, it's okay, they should be that upset with me. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
No, no, it's a good point. It's a
mm.
really good point. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I was thinking about the third character that was emerging in my head as you were talking about those two examples
Mm.
was if somebody's angry and they aren't checking their action, right? They're angry and they're
Mm.
just taking plates out the cupboard and
Yeah,
smashing
yeah,
them.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Are they doing better though? Because
Mm.
are they feeling their emotion better in doing
Mm.
that? Or is that because
No.
I've heard this before. Yeah, yeah. I don't think
Yeah.
so, but I've heard that sometimes lashing out, doing the action is actually not letting yourself feel angry either, because it's kind of like it's like
Discharge.
yeah, it's a discharge. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, well, but that's so hard to understand. Like
I
that's so
know, I know.
hard.
I know, and that is so hard to understand. But I agree with you, because I think of like one of the initial points I made, which is we just we lack a fine-grained understanding of
Mm,
what we mean by emotions,
yeah, yeah,
and this idea that it's an internal experience, and we're
yeah.
not talking about the action, and then
Mm,
how anxiety plays into all of this.
yeah,
So someone who is just smashing plates
yeah, yeah.
is either Greek and dancing,
I know,
or
I'm so glad you
or
brought that up.
or they what can often be happening there is that it's actually the anxiety. You know how I talked about, you know, like the feeling of anger comes up, and we start to get really anxious about, oh, I don't like this feeling, I don't know what to do with it. The anxiety can become so great that it's actually like an anxious discharge that can lead us to start doing impulsive things. Like if you think about the fight or flight, that is actually an anxiety system. And often that really quick, impulsive, smashing plates, lashing out can be the this kind of mixture of anger starts, and then there's so much quick anxiety on top of it that we just need to do, like we just do something. So it can be that it's not even pure anger. And what I mean by that is when someone is just in touch with anger at its root, and there's zero anxiety in the system, it can be actually very controlled and very calm. Like it doesn't have to have this quickness to it.
Yeah, the frenetic.
Yeah. So you think about like, you know, it can be very calm. It can be yeah, I think yeah, it doesn't have to have that. So there's that component. But also I think the idea with the feelings is actually that you are able to have them inside you to a full extent. And I think I spoke about this with Daniel once, this full internal emotional experience, like this phrase. It's full and it's internal. It does not, there's a separation. You learn that it doesn't have to become your actions, that there is some step in between where you decide this kind of agency piece to either then truthfully act it out or not, or bring it into your actions in a different way. So again, if we go back to anger as a nice example of that, it's often the case for people, if you really get very honest, that to get really in touch with a feeling of anger inside, to really let yourself see in your mind's eye what the impulse associated with that would be from a primal point of view, is to hurt someone, to be quite aggressive. And just seeing that imagery in our mind and noticing that that lives inside us can be way too confronting for many people. It's that to even notice the image, to notice like a warmth in my hand, that if it was just left to just go, would probably turn into a fist and hit this person, or like, you know, whatever it is. Just noticing that inside ourselves, especially towards someone we love, can be so confronting. And this often happens with parents with children. You know, they have young children, and children are, you know, pushing all our buttons, right? And it can be the case that for parents, it's the first time they really sort of come face to face with noticing inside how difficult it is to acknowledge how angry they feel towards their small child who they love more than anything and is dependent on them. And it doesn't have to come into your actions. So so the person who is smashing the plates, there may be a problem there in terms of being able to hold inside themselves the totality of the emotion, including the impulse. There's a need to discharge, right? And so that's not them feeling their feelings. That's them acting out to cut it short, if that makes sense. To get rid of it.
Right. Well, if I could just focus on mashing plates, I know what to do. You feel more of a sense of control. I wonder if that's sitting with that feeling, and you know, what was the expression with Daniel, your talk, the full internal emotional experience. Yeah. Like to sit with that feels so uncontrollable in a way. Like what's weird is that the person who acts out is doing something that from the bird's eye view is like, whoa, they're just out of control. Look at them. Right. But I wonder if that for that person, it's their way of feeling like they're back in control, because sitting with those feelings is the sea. It's the sea of all of the feelings. Right. And it's like, I'm drowning, like help. I don't want to be feeling this way, not realizing that, like, hey, it's almost like free fall, like, right? Like you're falling out the plane. Like that terrifies me, by the way. Like I'm always like, yeah, please don't push me out of a plane. I don't know who I'm telling this to.
Yeah. We'll do that next time. We'll do that for our next conversation. Yeah, we'll just jump out of a plane.
Well, like got GoPros on our heads, and like that's what we are. Just our talk is just us.
We totally should one day. We should one day. Maybe when we're much older and frail, that'll be even more.
So we'll be skydiving together. I'll put it in the books for us
Definitely. Yes,
we'll put
please.
in the books to come. Yeah, like that's on our list.
Love it. Please, please sign me
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. That sounds great. I might do it if we're gonna do it together, you know?
Yes,
Yeah,
I would.
yeah.
I'd do it. Yeah, yeah.
But I can imagine like, yeah, I have many, bad dreams of like, the fall.
Yeah,
And
the falling. Yeah.
I think that what's interesting though is from what I've heard of why people even want to skydive. They might like the thrill of the fall feeling, but there's also the free fall, which is like, oh wow, like I feel like I'm floating. I feel like I can fly. I feel like, there's all of these really rushing emotions of feeling actually quite like, yeah, floating, or it's almost like you're swimming, or something like this, right? Like that peaceful kind of feeling, which you could never really imagine would come out of like propelling yourself into midair. But
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
relief. Like a relief from
Yeah,
the
from the yeah.
defensive stuff that is trying so
Mm,
hard
mm,
because it really believes you can't bear something, you can't hold something, right?
yeah.
And that's not to say, I mean, I should make clear there are some people for which they actually can't. Like it's not, but like in a more general sense, it can be a relief from just all
Mm,
that other stuff that you don't even realize is going
mm,
on, the
mm,
energy that is going on to keep all of the
mm,
structure held in, and the
mm,
letting go into it. That just happens inside me. And I can just be still and calm in terms of action. I don't have to do
mm,
anything.
mm.
There's there is a real
Yeah,
sense of relief, but it's very experiential. Like it's a really hard thing to describe to
yeah.
someone.
Yeah, because I'm kind of
Yeah,
like, I would like, it's kind of one of those things where like, what is that? I like, have I ever experienced that, or have I never? And I'd love to know how to, it's kind of one of those things. But again, probably not
yeah.
a, 10-step, wiki how article about how to have a full internal
Yeah.
experience. But I do think what it sounds like is that ability to just to actually start acknowledging all of the feelings that you are actually feeling, and to be able to even think about what it wants you to do, right? And saying,
The impulse. Yeah,
yeah,
the
what's that
impulse.
impulse
So,
there,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
instead of just saying like, I'm either a terrible human being for wanting to do that, or the opposite of being like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. It's like, well, maybe I just need to understand that I'm right now, I'm a witness. I'm a witness to what is occurring within myself. I do wonder if that for a lot of people does feel like they're out of control. Like, is that why people avoid it so much? Like, or is it
The
just because
noticing the impulse, you
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like noticing the impulses, noticing the feelings, because again, if there's a person doing the lash, it's either like suffocate, right? Just don't even acknowledge it, don't
Mm,
even think about it. Or there's the person who just is like, like smashing the plates. You know, those two things are, I feel like it's trying to do an agency thing. And I don't know, maybe I'm just
mm.
wrong here, like in terms of that's trying to establish more control, and sitting with it feels like lack of control. But I'm just wondering what, in a sense, like the whole idea is to actually start to learn agency, but maybe we trick ourselves into thinking we are having agency, because it's like, no, 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 I'm doing something. Oh, I'm doing something. I'm stuffing it way down. I'm doing something great.
Mm,
I have a lot of agency. I have a
mm,
lot of agency.
mm,
I'm smashing plates. Look at all of my agency. So I wonder,
mm.
is this like a kind of deceptive trick that's happening with the mind that we might be doing? And would you describe it, just from your own experience with people sitting with those feelings and the overwhelm of that? Is there something, at least for some people, where it's like, oh, they feel out of control, so that's why they've been avoiding it, but when they sit into it, they realize, oh, wait a second, this isn't actually about me controlling or not controlling, but acknowledging, being present with, allowing, right, allowing it, then there can be that relief, right?
Yeah,
So
beautiful question.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you,
yeah, yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm just going to give some examples that I just want to preface are not representative of everyone in the way that everyone presents, and there are
Yeah,
different
yeah, yeah,
ways this goes. But I just, I don't want to imply this as everybody,
yeah,
and there
yeah,
are
yeah.
different ways of working on it depending on these things.
Mm-hmm.
But in short, in answer to your question, um, what is generally the case is that people come to find that uh, people come to find that once they are able to sit in the room, say with me, and more honestly, more completely tune into and consciously experience the feeling inside that has been so thwarted for so long in all these different ways and cut, because it's thinking about, it's not just complete avoidance. For some people, they know it. They're like, oh no, I'm angry all the time. But there's a way that it gets cut short very quickly. Or, yeah, and it might be the thing, like, and then I smash some plates or whatever, and like this. But so it's for most people, once they get to the point where where this happens, they experience that, oh, when I really finally see. So it's experiencing in my body the sensation of the feeling, but then also allow myself to see the truth of the impulse that comes with it, whether I would choose that or not.
Yeah.
Because this is the real distinction. It's usually very animalistic, because that is what the emotional system is about.
Yeah.
And so actually the act of love, and the act of our like higher order thinking and our human, our sort of our human relatedness and our wanting to be in relationship with others, it's actually all of that, which keeps us from often ever acting out what the actual impulse would be. Anyway, I'm now going sideways. Let me stick with the point, and then I can go back.
I love it.
What people usually come to find is that once they really just have that full feeling inside, all of it, that they can be clear on what the impulse would be, even if it's really confronting and really difficult to say and to see. That often there's a calming quality. It's just very calm on the other side of it. Now it depends what we're talking about. So like if we're talking about anger, or even if we're talking about like a deep pain or grief or guilt, and there's sort of a passage of that, which can be can be crying and sobbing, and or with anger, it might be the real feeling of it that actually, so with anger, it actually disrupts anxiety. So this really sort of anxious tension that people are feeling as they're sort of resisting looking at it, and that they often get confused with anger.
Yeah.
Once the anger is fully experienced and they really see it, it actually disrupts all the anxiety. The anxiety goes away. You imagine all that tension just disappearing. And it's very counterintuitive. It's not what people are expecting. They think, if I really let myself see this, then I'm going to do it, like I'm going to lose control. And it's usually people experience the opposite. So they come to see that actually it's a weird thing to talk about when it hasn't been experienced. It can just sound so strange. But there's this calm and there's a clarity that can often come. It's like all the filters that are just always in operation, trying to keep you in a particular mode of taking in information around you, start to fall away. And you just sort of, there's a groundedness, a calm, often a clarity. What can also come on the other side of it, and is really relevant to the work I do, is all sorts of relevant links to past memories just come up. All of a sudden it's like, oh, you know what comes to mind? Something that happened with my mother when I was, or like just new realizations, but it's spontaneous and it's client-led. Like it just comes up and out because everything else has been, all the defenses have been lowered. And actually there's this drive inside that is trying to help the therapist and the client, the relationship. It's trying to help the relationship. It's trying to help us see how this connects to things that matter in the past to further amplify the learning. It's really a beautiful, incredible thing. Like that component of the therapy is, I mean, I hate to use this word, but I also love using this word. It feels a bit like magic. Like it's this beautiful, then the client is just reporting that they're their own therapist in that moment. Things just become so clear to them. And it's and this can also link to often people will come into therapy and they might start off with, I'm in a relationship, I don't know if I should stay or go, for example, right? Like I'm tortured, just tell me what to do, right? And then you sort of can't, obviously. And then you sort of go through this therapy process, and on the other side of it, they don't need me to tell them what to do. It's just a clarity. Oh, I understand now actually what's been happening here. And whatever it is, they just, and so it enhances their own their own agency, their own autonomy. And they no longer need me. And that's a wonderful thing. And so to answer your question, it's generally the case that people have a calmness and a grounding and a clarity on the other side of it. And they come to realize, hopefully, oh, I can bear these things inside. There is a complete distinction between what happens inside me with an emotion versus like real actions that I get to choose to take.
Yeah.
And I think that the anger in loving sort of committed long-term relationships or any relationship is a good example of that, because people can often come to see that I don't need to be, for example, for some people, I don't need to be so scared of looking at the anger because my love, my love for this person, my love for humanity, whatever, keeps me from I wouldn't actually act that out, but it's important to see that primal part inside me. Right? The animalistic primal part that's hardwired into all of us.
Yes.
I don't judge myself for it or shame myself for it or attack myself for it. I can just see it for what it is. And yet the fact that I never act that out is a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Right? But it's there. Like, does that make sense? There's an honesty to it's there. And I do like to, for some people who really villainize, especially anger, I do like to also help them see, I imagine that there would be some scenario in your life where you would want that to be there. And often for parents, something's happening to your child, someone's attacking your child, or, wouldn't you want that impulse to also be available to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. To protect
so there is
yourself, to protect your children. Yeah.
Yes. And so there is a yeah, I think all of that's vital. But that's why the experiential aspect of it is so important, and why actually talking about these styles of therapy can be so difficult, because it does all sound very abstract, but then once you experience it, it clicks into place. It's quite a hard thing to put into words, I think, and it's quite counterintuitive.
Yeah. That was also so good. So good. Thank you so much for sharing. And, I always feel really, for lack of a better word, I do feel truly honored to hear from your own experience as a therapist and in therapy, because I think what you do is so important. And so, sorry, I just think
to be sorry at all.
But it's so important. And when you talk about, that magic that can happen, it's it's inspiring, really. And it's exciting to know that's even possible for human beings. Like there's an excitement. And so I love getting to hear from you. And I think it's it's such a beautiful, special thing. Like there's a way in which there seems to be a level of almost the sacred, and using the word, something quite magical that is occurring in that space. So to learn from it and to be able to hear from that experience and that place is really it's extremely valuable and touching. So yeah, I appreciate it.
No, the word sacred really resonates for me. And it's so beautiful to hear you reflect it in that way. I really, really appreciate just your vulnerability and your openness to just be with me and share that with me. Truly. And to me, this is what it's all about. This is the reason for it all, is just to be with another person. To just share.
And I think, you were describing a bit of how it goes in therapy or these moments. And it made me like have a deep appreciation. I know we haven't, met in person, but like the fact that your heart is there for people to want to be able to provide or be vulnerable enough to create that space too, because I'm sure it's scary or I could see it being scary as a therapist, right? Because you're like,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, like to be able to actually be present enough and allow the process to unfold, but still, create some of the how do I say it? Like you have to sort of bring the right conditions, right? So that that unfolding can occur. And so it's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not always easy, and can be scary in a way, but also so worthwhile, so beautiful. And so ultimately, quite rewarding for all involved, to be
Oh,
able
yeah, yeah,
to see that and experience that. And yeah, I think too, like why I'm so touched and maybe why I'm crying is because, yeah, like I think about people in my life who, like, I desire for them to have that clarity, right? Or I don't know, maybe there's a part of me that just thinks like, wow,
yeah.
that the fact that that clarity can be come to through this honesty, through this like almost admitting. It's like this type of admitting to yourself and being okay with admitting to yourself is just so yeah, I lack for words right now, but it's just something that's quite,
It's a
you
really
know,
loving gesture towards
yeah,
oneself. And
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
real embrace of
yeah.
oneself.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, I just took a peek at myself, like, oh my golly. You know, um, I
But it's
appreciate that you held space for me in my crying and my my sort of discombobulation. Um, yeah,
oh, it's such an honor. It's such an honor, really.
yeah,
That the emotion would be here, and this conversation
yeah,
it really means something.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I
And
think
and
that,
I
yeah,
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 no, no, I hear in the way that you speak, just this beautiful hope. This, you've
yeah,
used the
yeah,
word
yeah,
hope a few times, and
yeah.
such a beautiful open heart. And I appreciate it so much. I appreciate it so much, and I see it
Yeah.
in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Aspasia. Yeah. And that's what that's what I sense in you. And like the fact that you've dedicated your time and your life really to doing this. It's just so moving. It's just so moving to me. And yeah, I think there's something that is, I don't know. I think there's something that's just a type of marvel. Like I was saying, like there's a marveling that this is even possible between human beings,
Yeah.
and it's
No, I
it's
agree.
it's wild. I mean, and I think
It is
sometimes I don't
wild.
know if it's just people get into the place of like things can never change or things can never be different, but what you're doing, and I think even through what we've talked about through this conversation is saying no. Like there are possibilities, there can be, and yeah, ultimately a person may not want to change, and I don't, it's not my,
Yeah.
it's not anyone's place to say if they should or shouldn't, in the sense of they're going to still need to make their own choice for their life. But yeah,
There. The
just
fact that
it's
it's there,
there, it's
there, it's a
there.
possibility.
Yes,
And
yes,
there's
yes.
I do love so much that you've brought this up, because there's a real mystery. There is a real
Yeah,
mystery. And
yeah.
I mean, I'll only speak for myself, because I don't know that it's true that every therapist sees it that way. But for me, it really ties into the metaphysical.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
and it is there are those moments in therapy where
Yeah,
I don't even know what's happening. I couldn't even put it into words, but there is
right.
something really deep happening.
Mm,
And
mm.
um
Yeah,
and it's the connection. It really is
yeah,
the connection.
yeah,
And I think there is
absolutely. Yeah.
the clarity that can come when defenses are so down and you are just there with another person. And maybe that's the first time that's
Mm.
ever happened.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
and even for me, like even on the therapist side of things,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
the intimacy that gets established
yeah,
it's
yeah,
wild, and it
yeah,
can be unlike anything else. And
yeah.
there's a real, I mean, I think it's so lovely that you're even thinking about it, because it's true.
Mm.
There can be a pressure for the therapist, obviously, about the responsibility of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be, the therapist needs to always be doing their own work. And that is obviously on top of everything else, being a parent, being a wife,
Yeah.
but on top of everything else, its own thing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's not very common for people to even consider the perspective or experience of the therapist
Mm-hmm.
when they're talking about these things. So
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that your mind even goes there. I really appreciate that, because I think that's probably its own conversation, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's an honor.
Yeah.
I mean that so truly. It really is an honor for me to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
What a thing. And
Yeah.
I screw it up all the time. And I'm, it's like being a parent. I
Mm-hmm.
get it wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And I've just, the more that I let myself um reflect on that and be honest about that, and oftentimes share that with the client. I've been reflecting on last time, and what I think happened was, and I was, doing this, and I think I did a disservice to you by that. And what was your experience though? And like, it actually, it's a modeling as well of how to be in that kind of relationship. It's not going to be perfect. We're always going to be getting it wrong because we are separate from one another.
Yeah.
And that separateness will lead to challenge and to getting it wrong. And it's bringing that actually into the relationship. I can be closer to you by reflecting. I'm aware of time, and I'm going to have to.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I was trying to wrap it
No,
up at the 10, and then I'm
okay.
like, okay, now I'm crying. So
I would stay all day. I'm loving this. It's only that I've got another meeting. No, really,
no,
I'm
I've
so in
loved
the
this.
flow.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's funny. It's like our first time really having
It is.
face-to-face conversation, and I could keep talking to you for like hours more, days more. So it's a good
too. I
sign.
could truly keep going.
Yeah.
One thing I did just want to circle back to, because I see this little scribbled note here and I never got to it, was you were saying something about sort of, children and maybe even like early teenage years, and when they're sort of sulking around, and I'm angry with you, I'm not going to talk to you all day. And I think one thing to always hold in mind is that really one of the most powerful things that we can be teaching everyone, not just kids, even us, is that you can just put words to it, right? So, so for many people, they might just sulk and avoid and withdraw. And really, you could to sort of come to a place where you could say, you can come, you can tell me, I'm really angry at you right now. I am really angry at you right now. And learning, so for a child, learning that their parent can tolerate hearing that, and that doesn't lead to punishment. How dare you say that to me? I'm your mother. Like that doesn't create anxiety in the parent, that doesn't lead to them being punished, that actually parent might look at them and say, thank you for sharing that with me. I can understand that you would feel angry with me right now. I'm telling you, you can't do something that you really want to do. I understand that. You still can't do it, right? You still can't do it. But you're very welcome to feel anger towards me. Right, like it's the welcoming that's what I mean about the connection. It doesn't have to break the connection. For so many people, we learn that you don't tell your mum or your dad that you're angry at them, and so instead it comes out in all these other punishing ways, the not talking, the avoiding, and just putting words to it. Even for very young kids, it can be, and that's okay. You can. I know now. You're going to go off, and you don't want to, hang out with me right now. And I'm here whenever you're ready to come back. I'm here. I'm here, and I love you, and I'm here. And yeah, yeah. I just wanted to make sure.
That was good. I'm very glad. I'm very glad to hear that. I was really like, I want to know what else Lucia thinks about that. So I'm really glad you touched back on that. And
I would also like to say, as a disclaimer, that does not mean that is what I am doing every time I am parenting. I am just as human and messy as anyone else. Let me tell you.
One day I realized
one day my son will potentially watch this back when he's an adult and be like, oh, really? I don't remember that. I do think that's really important, because when we talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
these
yeah,
things,
yeah,
people fall into the trap of thinking, oh, wow, she must be the perfect parent. No, no,
yeah.
no.
Well,
Just as human as everyone else.
I'm part of that
Yeah.
club too. I'm not perfect parent, but we do our best. And I think what you shared about sharing that process of like, hey, hey, I'm sorry, and
Yeah.
asking for
Repair.
forgiveness, repair, and then saying, next time I'm going to take a step back and slow down a little bit, and
Yes.
let's maybe think about how we can deal with this in a different way, where we can talk, we can share that. And yeah, like you said, it's still going to be this way, right? You might still
Yeah.
not be happy about it, but we can, we can have those conversations, and that's super important. Because guess what? Often it means if they don't feel that place of connection, and that's what the beautiful thing. One of the things that again made me cry so much is that it's connection. Yes, change. Yes, but what causes a change? It's like what causes the light to go from dark to light. You plugged in the lamp, like there was a connection made. Like that's what causes the change, is the connection. So, anyways, but I think like this ability to unfortunately I lost my train of thought there, but this ability to say we can, oh right, because if they don't have that with you, sometimes we can seek it elsewhere, right? We can seek it in bad places. Unfortunately, not bad places, but like inappropriate places, right? Or places that aren't healthy for us or the other person or whatever, or situation or whatever. So anyways, I want to say that, but I will let you go, darling, because I know you have another meeting, and I'm just so touched for your time and for this chance to speak. Yeah.
It's been incredible, and I hope we get to do it again soon. And just a
Yes.
very brief reflection that I don't know what your experience was, but for me, I mean, I felt so connected to you throughout. I don't want this to sound like I haven't, but
Yeah.
if I had to choose a moment where I felt most just honed in and truly connected to you, like I really saw you and felt you, was when you had that emotion.
Yeah.
It was when you cried. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's important too, right?
Yeah.
That can be
Yeah.
such a connecting thing. You don't even need the words. And when
Yeah.
we can be with our
Hmm.
partner or our children, perhaps,
Hmm.
depending, or our friends or
Hmm.
whoever,
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't need to be an intellectual conversation to really let them know you're there. And you,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
think obviously like you have an incredible gift, and I'm thankful to be able to be, in your presence as much as we can be through Zoom. And, it's funny because thinking back, I'll wrap it up quickly, but it's almost like, where did that come from, right? Why?
No,
But, sometimes I wonder if that's what emotions like gently let us know, is that they are here. You don't have to apologize for it.
yeah,
Something resonated, something touched you deeply. And guess what?
yeah,
Like, I do think that we are vessels. And sometimes when you jolt the vessel because something touched you or moved you, it spills out.
yes.
It spills out.
And what a mystery. And what a
What a
mystery.
mystery.
What a beautiful thing to
Yeah,
be in
yeah.
it together. Oh,
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Aspasia. I hope that you have
you
a beautiful rest of the day. And thank you again
too.
for your time.
I hope you have a
Okay.
lovely sleep.
Oh, thank you so much. I will.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.